This month's kit contains 12 3.5-inch squares. Out of those squares, 4 of them, there's only a single square in the fabric. And the other 4 fabrics, there are 2 squares. The ones that there are only 1 piece are going to be the center of our square and a square block. Those squares need to be trimmed down to 2 5/8 inches. I'm not going to show you how to cut down a square again this month because I've done it the last 2 months. Just pay attention because it does need to be 2 5/8, and that's a little different from our normal cuts. It's not a 1/4 inch increment. So I will do those off camera. The rest of them need to be cut in half on the diagonal. Now the pattern calls for 2 3/4 inch squares for this, and if you want to, you can trim them down, but I'm choosing to just cut these in half at the 3.5 inches, and I will trim the block down when it's finished. So to cut these, and you can stack them up if you want to. Oops, sorry. You will need a straight edge. You're just going to line up from corner to corner. And cut. And you'll do that with all 8 of those. So you'll end up with 4 of each color that are going to go around the center square. You can combine the square and square blocks any way you want. Just choose what color you want for your center and what color you want for your outside edge. I'm ready to stitch now, so I will just show you with one of them. I did leave these oversized, so you'll notice they do not fit exactly. I'm going to sew them on opposite sides, and then I will go back and sew the other side, but I'll show you that. When I'm sewing a square and a square block, I like to find the center of both the triangle, and I usually just crease it, but if you want to, you can put a pin in there to mark your spot. And then I also find the center on the square on the inside, and again I usually just crease it, but because it'll be easier to see on the camera, I'll go ahead and put a pin in. And then I want to match either my pins or my creases like this. I will flip it over and stitch 1/4 inch, and I'll do exactly the same on the other side. Okay, I've stitched the triangles on the opposite sides, and as you can see, I press the seam toward the center square as the pattern instructed. Now it starts getting a little bit awkward with these hanging out here since I didn't trim my my squares down smaller before I cut them into triangles. So you can cut those ears off. To do that, just going to line up the edge of the ruler with the cut edge of the square and cut, and then flip it around and do the same thing. This time I'm double checking to make sure that I still have my 2 5/8 width here. So you don't have to do that. If you do, that's fine. That makes life easier. Again, I'm going to add the triangles onto the opposite sides, and I'm going to do it exactly the same way as I did the last time. I will fold the triangle in half, find the center, crease it or put a pin in it, and then this piece again, and I'm more concerned about the center of the square than I am the pieces on the outside, so I've lined up the seam allowances, center, and put a crease in it, and now I will go sew them. I've added my last 2 triangles to each square, and I have pressed the seams this time away from the center square towards the triangle. Once that's done, we need to trim the block down to exactly 3.5 inches. Now to do that, we're going to take our ruler and line up the 1/4 inch mark on the points here and cut off this side and then this side. And you can do it one side at a time if you want to, or you can cut off two sides at a time. So there's my first cut. And my second one, I still need to make sure it's 3.5 inches, but I also want 1/4 of an inch above each point. So that's what I'm looking for here. Oops, it would help if I did it the right way. 3.5. Trim, trim. And you're going to do that to all 4 of them. Now that all 4 square and square blocks are together, they go together in a row, and you can put them together in any order you want. It doesn't matter, just whatever makes you happy. Now this is one time that I do use pins. I find my point on one block, and it's coming through right here, and then put the pin through the point on the other block, line those up, and I don't just twist this because it will pull the seams apart sometimes, so I put a pin in on each side of that and pull the pin that's in the points out. I like to use really fine pins for this rather than a nail because it is more accurate for me that way. I don't know whether you'll be able to see it on camera or not, but my goal when I'm stitching this seam is to go exactly through where those seams intersect so that my points line up. If you have to fudge a little, just do it till you're happy. If you're having problems with it, you might consider matching your points and just basting across here, then checking it to make sure it's lined up where you want, and then come back and stitch with your regular stitch length. I am going to press the seams open, and that will complete the square and a square strip. We do have another block to do this month because there are more than 12 in this quilt. So I'll be back with that. Okay, just to show you real quick, here's my square and a square unit with my seams pressed open, so that's how my back looks. Also in your kit, you're going to find 12 4-inch squares. These are for pinwheel blocks, and you can pair them up any way you want. I'm going to go ahead and put black and green, blue and red, and brown and gold, but it really doesn't matter. We are going to make half square triangles just like we did in month 1, so let me do that again. I've put the squares right sides together in pairs, and you should have 2 sets of exactly the same fabric, and I'm going to mark a diagonal line from corner to corner on one piece of fabric in each block. I forgot to mention that the pattern calls for 3.5-inch squares. If you want to cut them down, you can. I'm not bothering because I'm going to be squaring these up later anyway. So we're going to mark all of them, and then I will stitch 1/4 of an inch away from the line on both sides. I have my whole string of squares that I have chain pieced together, and I have stitched on both sides of the line just like I said. The next step is to cut these apart on the line. You can use scissors if you want to. I find a rotary cutter to be quicker for me. And what you're going to end up with is 4 half square triangle units that are exactly the same. I'm going to take them to the iron and press towards the dark. So let's just do a refresher on pressing. I first come with the iron and I press straight down to set the seam, and then I flip up, and you can finger press if you want to, and then it's an up and down motion with the iron, not a back and forth, so you don't stretch it. I'm back with all of my pressed half square triangle units. The next step is to trim them down to 2.5-inch squares. I'm going to use the block lock tool again, like I did in month 1, just because it is so cool and gets you such accurate blocks. It has a groove in the bottom that locks on to the seam, and it will only work one way. If you go the other way, it doesn't. You'll notice I don't get my corner up on the top. So my corner needs to be lining up with my corner. So my first step is to clean cut the edges on 2 sides. Weird angle. And then all I have to do is put my fingers down on the tool, twist it. You don't even have to pick it up, except for I may have moved out of camera range. And then I can just slide the ruler down until I get to the 2.5 mark. It's here and here. And I'm going to trim the other 2 sides. There's my 2.5-inch square. Let's try it again on another one, just because it's fun. Clean cut the edges. Twist the block and the ruler, slide down to the 2.5 mark, and cut the other 2 edges. Hopefully you noticed my corner is always lining up with the seam. So I'll go ahead and cut the rest of those. Once you have trimmed all the half square triangle units to 2.5-inch squares, then arrange them into a pinwheel, and I will be sewing them together in pairs first, like this, right sides together. And because the seams are going going towards the dark, it will kind of nest together and hold it there for you. So I'll just chain piece those. The half square triangles are sewn together in pairs, and now those pairs need to be sewn together to finish the pinwheel. So it's going to be right sides. Oh, I forgot to mention, I once again pressed toward the dark fabric on both of them. So my seams are going in opposite directions. So I will put them together, and those seams should nest. And when I stitch, I want to go right through this intersection right here. Use a pin if you need to. If your seam allowance is accurate, just the nesting should take care of it for you. I showed this last month, but once I've sewn my last seam across here, if I open it up and press one way or the other, then I have a huge amount of bulk here in the center. It's even worse than with the 4-patch. So I can take it and just twist the seams opposite directions, and this couple stitches that are inside the seam allowance from the last seams will pop apart, and then my seams can go opposite directions, and I get a little pinwheel in the center, and you'll notice the seam allowances from the 4-patch portion of this do a pinwheel. Here it is after I've pressed it. It's nice and neat and much flatter in the center than if I had pressed the other way. So once all 3 of those are pressed, that wraps up month 3 of the mystery. So set those aside.